die, Vitalik Buterin wins, other ether whales win, the software developers win, and nothing of true utility ever gets built. In the real world, when a company goes public, if you don't provide real value to the public, you lose money. But why, oh why, would Matt Damon be calling us puss boys if blockchain is useless? Well, there's a lot of billionaires and millionaires stuck in the system who want to pump the bag and cash out. But there's also a lot of people who legitimately want this technology to be revolutionary, and we have to understand why.
Writing this script caused me physical pain. I'm serious. This video broke my brain. Now we have to leave posts on r/Bitcoin like I think the Federal Reserve actually introduced some beneficial fiscal policies. Just to feel something again.
Philosophy behind Bitcoin is all depriving the government of any power over monetary policy. To explain the way that Bitcoin is coded, the digital mining of Bitcoin is supposed to reflect the mining of gold. So the increase in Bitcoin supply is supposed to happen around the same rate that gold was mined. So back in 2010, you could mine a few blocks an hour on your Pentium processor. But as time went on, the mining of gold got increasingly difficult and slowed down, just as mining Bitcoin gets increasingly difficult as time goes on. And people have to buy more mining nodes and burn down more forests, etc. to get the same amount of coin. If you can prove you've done the work to the rest of the network of computers, you're allowed to enter the little Bitcoin lottery, which awards you with a bit of a Bitcoin. This is exactly what proof of work is. You've got to prove you've done the work. You've got to prove that you've burnt down a forest. Bitcoin is coded to reflect the gold standard. So this is the monetary system we had until the 1930s. And since many coiner bros don't seem to be aware of what happened in history, let's explain this properly.
In the roaring 20s, the post-war economy was booming, and the rich were thinking, hey, you know what's even cooler than money? More money. So greedy people thought that buying stocks with the money that they actually had wasn't enough. So they started buying more stocks with bank loans, and the greedy banks were like, cool, more interest for me, bro. I don't foresee any closures happening here.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device.
Companies were having more money chucked at them than a sexy stripper in a sleazy speakeasy. They didn't know what to spend it on anymore. And because people had already bought the stuff that they needed, they started to buy stocks instead. And there was way too much money sloshing around in the system without any actual products being produced or bought by customers. Wait, does that kind of sound familiar? People started to notice the lack of any actual value leaving the system, and panic began to spread, and people ran to the banks to take all of their money out. Banks at the time were very small and had to sell assets and take out loans themselves to give people their deposits back. This sucked all of the money out of the economy at once, and a deflationary spiral happened. Prices dropped, businesses cut costs, people got fired, nobody had money to spend on goods anymore, inventory built up, prices dropped even more, ad infinitum. Then, during the 1930s, the Great Depression was swinging its dick hard in the faces of the poor as unemployment soared. But the Fed Res didn't yet follow any sort of fiscal policy for injecting money into the system. The US and European central banks still followed the gold standard and were refusing to give it up. But the UK was like the cool guy at the gold party. And when we left the gold party in 1931, gradually over the next 5 years, all the other countries were like, yeah, this gold party kinda sucks, and by 1936 all countries were out and smoking some green at the way cooler, much more laid back Fiat after party. In that same year, John Maynard Keynes came through and dropped his smash hit, The General Theory of Unemployment, Interest and Money, and told the world's governments that if they bought 12 hard copies each, they'd all get a free Keynes Friend NFT. And that's why we all follow his teachings on fiscal policies to this day. Actually, it might have been because it turned out they worked pretty well. Because securities fraud was rife in the lead up to the stock market crash. Wait, does that kind of sound familiar? The SEC was created in 1933 along with the FDIC, which acts as a sort of bank insurance policy that the banks pay a premium for. And this ensures that if a bank ever fails ever again, everybody's deposits would actually be protected up to a certain amount. Not everybody was happy with the retirement of the gold standard and the inception of the Fed Res, however, especially the rich. So wealthy businessmen plotted to overthrow President Roosevelt and replace him with a dictator. Thankfully, this never happened, but you could probably call what's happening right now Business Plot 2, Blockchain Boogaloo. Cut to German school children being read stories from a pamphlet called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It is Nazi Germany, 1933, and Hitler is using the Great Depression to gain power. The belief of a planned secret world domination spreads, along with the belief that Jewish people are controlling the press and the central banks, and slowly devaluing your money through inflation to keep it for themselves. Wait, does that kind of sound familiar? They recommend buying gold to protect yourself. One of the main assertions being that gold equals money. Wait, does that kind of sound familiar? These ideologies became inextricably linked with wealthy businessmen who still believed in the gold standard. Eugenics and debunked bell curve theories gained traction, a science funded by the wealthy industrialist owners class. A cult was formed based on an obsession with the gold standard. The same man who started that cult went on to create the Freedom School, which birthed the modern American libertarianism movement.
They require a license to drive. What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster?
Ooh, fun fact, Charles Koch was one of the students. The ideologies of the Freedom School have weaved their way through the last century, with reincarnations through various libertarian organizations and figures such as Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard, who were also strong gold standard proponents. In 1997, libertarians James Dale Davidson and William Rees Mogg, yes, that is his dad, published The Sovereign Individual, expressing disdain for pesky taxes and pushing a future of sound money via some sort of digital cash. And our mate Peter Thiel loved this so much he wrote a foreword. We'll come back to him.
Okay, since the 1930s, there have been two main economic schools of thought that fight over the cause of that global financial crash. Keynesians mostly fought to remove the gold standard and introduce fiscal policy, and Austrian school economists or monetarists fought to keep it, blaming governments printing our money for all of our problems. Although various policies from both sides have been implemented over the years, the argument to leave the gold standard behind has prevailed. It is widely considered among economists today that this is what helped lift the economy out of the depression. And look, I am not a fucking economist, okay? I can only tell you objectively what's happened in the past, and that there is 99% consensus among all leading economists today that a return to the gold standard right now would be a pretty fucking bad idea. On the contrary, have any conversation with a Bitcoin bro and you'll soon find that they believe that they've earned a master's level economics degree awarded by the fucking school of Reddit, and they actually believe that a coded in monetary policy devised by one person in 2008 is the answer to everyone's fiscal woes. The number go up brainworms are real. And if you're an r/Bitcoin bro currently writing me a lovely thesis in the comments about the fucking Cantillon effect, I respectfully ask you to instead write your comment out in Notepad on a cheap laptop with Windows XP installed, burn the file to several DVDs, post the DVDs to a neutral third party, then ask them to BlackBerry your comment to a USB printer in a remote hotel room, go to the hotel room, and don't leave until you've smashed the printer to pieces with a screwdriver. Selling a hedge against inflation to vulnerable people is not even a new scam. Glenn Beck peddled a scheme in which people would be pressured to buy gold at an inflated price with the promise that it would increase in value over time, using hard salesmen and pressure tactics to convince them that the dollar would be inflated to near zero. The company was eventually forced to refund $4.5 million to customers. The same thing is happening right now with Bitcoin, except this time there will be no one to sue because the salesmen are hexagons on Twitter. When I was researching this section of the video, all videos I could find on YouTube of people arguing that we were on the brink of another global financial crash because of rising inflation rates were also shilling dodgy looking courses. And this is true of all of the Bitcoin and crypto bros on Twitter. How can you trust anyone to give advice on a stock that they're personally benefiting from? Yet no one in the community seems to give a single fuck, as long as number go up. And the demonization of inflation in the mainstream press, dubbed by Republicans as Bidenomics, merely to use as a weapon against him, is not helping. The use of the words freedom and depriving ordinary people of value when translated simply means freedom for the rich, not taking money away from the rich. And it has meant this since the inception of conspiracy theories surrounding the Federal Reserve. And it still means this in the Bitcoin community now. For those in the back,
You're parroting the same talking points as Nazis.
Over the last 100 years, the Federal Reserve has created bubbles and burst them, enslaved us with debt, and destroyed our purchasing power through inflation. Yes, it's been a wonderful lie for the bankers. There are striking parallels in Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life to the lies and tricks that real bankers used to create the Federal Reserve.
and then they were shocked when Jordan Peterson was announced as a speaker at a Bitcoin event.
Are we the baddies?
0.01% of people invested in Bitcoin own 27% of Bitcoin right now. Who do you think is going to win here in the long run? How is that wealth all of a sudden going to be redistributed to the poor? You're not subverting the system. The system has already subverted you. You aren't getting rich. You're buying the Winklevoss twins another yacht. How about the people who are unable to buy a now or benefit from generational Bitcoin wealth? The people who can't afford to buy a now but who would like to have children in the future onto Ethereum. To understand Ethereum, I think it would be helpful to provide a quick background on Peter Thiel. In the 80s, Peter was at Stanford University, serving as editor-in-chief of the Stanford Review, a conservative libertarian newspaper. He then went on to co-found PayPal. Thiel wanted PayPal to be what people believe cryptocurrency provides today, a hedge against inflation, except facilitated by giving customers easy access to foreign currencies. He now regards the company as it is today as a failure of PayPal's original goal, and in 2015 on a Reddit AMA he mentioned his interest in Bitcoin fulfilling this vision for him. After selling PayPal in 2004, he went on to co-found Palantir, a data analysis firm. They stated that they could use their knowledge of fraud detection software in the fintech industry and apply this to a wider spectrum of data sets to detect terrorist activity on the internet. And their first backer was the CIA. Clearly building up an increasing interest in the harvesting of data, it's not surprising why in 2004 Peter dropped $500,000 into Facebook, becoming the first outside investor. He acquired 10% of the company and a position on the board. In 2013, Palantir controversially became involved in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Cambridge Analytica had gained access to 87 million Facebook profiles without the user's permission and used the data to target political ads. And it was this that experts believe may have swung the Brexit vote in Leave's favour. It was alleged by a whistleblower that multiple Palantir employees sort of helped them with this. Interestingly, Cambridge Analytica attempted to start its own cryptocurrency, Dragoncoin, for the specific purpose of harvesting people's data. It was marketed to the Chinese public as a way to gamble in casinos on the island of Macau because gambling regulations in China were rather restrictive. But the project was abandoned once the scandal came to light in 2018 and the company was shut down. The way that Cambridge Analytica was talking about it, they were viewing it as a means of being able to basically inflict government control and private corporate control over individuals, which just takes the whole initial premise of blockchain technology and turns it on its head in a very dystopian way. The year after Cambridge Analytica collapsed among a sea of controversy, in 2013, a young Russian man called Vitalik Buterin wrote the white paper for Ethereum. And in 2014, the Thiel Fellowship funded Vitalik Buterin with $100,000 to drop out of that stupid woke college that was no doubt poisoning his brain with evil multiculturalism and holding him back, and got him to pursue Ethereum full-time. In 2020, the NHS asked Palantir for help in battling the spread of the pandemic. Palantir charged the NHS just £1 for their services. They didn't care about the money. They just wanted the data. The NHS gave Palantir access to millions of British citizens' medical records with which they could train their data analysis models. In 2017, Bitcoin shot up in price when his VC, the Founders Fund, bought an estimated $15 to $20 million worth. I don't think it's a coincidence that the same people who are funding CIA-backed data analysis firms have direct ties to the Cambridge Analytica scandal and are scraping NHS data, are also funding blockchain technology. Do you really think Web3 is going to be about privacy and being in charge of your own data? In 2017, the Thiel Network came together in the UK. This is a network of conservative academics, including Jordan Peterson, who are attempting to influence government policy on free speech. Free speech being code for normalizing white nationalism. Palantir's chief of staff has attended meetings with Christian theologians at Cambridge University's Faculty of Divinity, with Jordan Peterson in attendance. Their common concern was the increasing threat from the advancement of a liberal agenda to traditional Christian religious and theological beliefs, including an unnerving fascination with race science. Unknown to most, Peterson seems to be sympathetic to scientific racism, despite disavowing far-right views, but tends to only admit this, and in carefully guarded terms, in specific discussions.
There are profound and virtually irremediable differences in people's cognitive performance, and that those differences have a very solid biological and heritable basis. The Ashkenazi Jews, for example, have on average a 15-point advantage over the rest of the Caucasian population, which is sufficient to account for their radical overrepresentation in positions of authority and influence and productivity. Of course, that was laid out to some degree in the bell curve back in the 1990s.
Peter has now left his position on the board of Facebook so he can spend more time supporting the campaign for Donald Trump's re-election, being Silicon Valley's most outspoken supporter of him.
Now we are told that the great debate is about who gets to use which bathroom. This is a distraction from our real problems. Who cares?
He's now heavily invested in Ethereum, Bitcoin, and EOS blockchain technology, and in addition has direct control of the most advanced data algorithms in the world. In 2011, Peter's plans of developing a private island free of all government regulation was scuppered when he came to realize that it was not quite feasible. The residents of the nearby French Polynesian islands had argued that they didn't get much say in the proposed plans to build the supposedly self-sustaining islands just off their shore, and only benefited the rich residents wanting to avoid tax. Funny that. This is a phenomenon libertarians have always dreamed of, and it's called seasteading.
Innovative political systems could serve humanity better than governments do today. That's why we work to enable seasteads, floating cities which will give people opportunities to peacefully test new ideas about living together. The most successful will become thriving new societies, inspiring change around the world. We're creating this future because governments profoundly affect our lives, and improving them would unlock enormous human potential.
The aim of Ethereum, it seems to me, is Thiel's second chance at seasteading. He wants to cyber seastead on a cloud economy, beholden to no government regulations and no tax. But he needs people to jump onto his seastead. And what better way to get people to jump than to tell people that there's treasure on the island? Crypto is worthless as a currency, but it's the perfect marketing strategy. It means Google and Facebook will no longer have all of Silicon Valley's precious data, but the largest companies to build on the blockchain will instead. And they won't be held back by silly regulations like GDPR if they get their own way. And remember, a blockchain is immutable. They'll potentially have access to a much larger pool of data than Google and Facebook have right now. This isn't the masses fighting the 1%. This is the 5% fighting the 1% for data. Sure, you can choose to have an NFT of your medical records on the chain, but we will eventually get to the point where it's made so easy and convenient for you to have, say, your medical records or your mortgage details on the chain that it would be almost stupid not to. We're already on the trajectory towards completely transparent data profiles right now. We purchase more and more devices and download more and more apps every day for the purposes of convenience, and we're beginning to accept that this just means that your data will belong to that company. But in the future, it will belong to all companies that build on the blockchain. It would be stupid not to build your app on the blockchain. There would be no hope of your tech startup being competitive if you didn't. As Satoshi Nakamoto said himself, it takes advantage of the nature of information being easy to spread, but hard to stifle. They would like a society governed by code written by them, without having to deal with the inconvenient nuances of a progressing society involving racial tensions or the experiences of trans people or Congress holding them back with rules and regulations. But the world isn't a logic puzzle that a Russian computer programmer can just code us out of. The human experience will never escape feelings and needs that go beyond rigid code. This is a utopian vision based on an engineer's entirely systemic analysis of how a society should be governed. Cultural and political contexts eradicated. The entire system is hard-coded to realize the whims of the richest in society. A free market is a type of democracy, but one where the poor get the fewest votes. And this is exactly how a DAO works, and this is exactly how proof of stake works. Consensus power over the whole chain for the rich. Crumbs for the poor, and you'll be so poor you'll be compelled to sell more of your data to the rich. This was already proven with the catastrophic failure of Ethereum's first ever DAO, the DAO, when the blockchain was hard forked to reverse a hack, draining their investors of $50 million. The VCs didn't want to lose their money, so they changed the rules. The unforked chain, Ethereum Classic, still exists, but its crypto is only worth $25 now. So I wonder why most people chose the chain that the rich people chose. And if you really want a sinking realization of how bad this could get if it were devoid of any regulation, just Google assassination politics. Back to present day, and blockchain technology advocates are pushing the idea of social media on the blockchain. On a protocol which records the history of everything you've ever done online, the incentive to remain completely anonymous is absolutely paramount. This could give rise to an increase in far-right ideologies peddled online, culminating in terrible situations if left to develop unregulated. It's quite hard to conceptualize what the future they're envisioning would look like right now. in much the same way that someone in the 80s couldn't envision what the iPhone can do right now. So try to think of it like this. Bitcoin wants to be a simple peer-to-peer payment app on your iPhone. Ethereum wants to be the iPhone. All of the data on the blockchain is the large chip in this iPhone. It's a ginormous database of everybody's medical records, social media presence, past and present, financial history, your life story, your loves, your hates, everything. Based on this ginormous database, using patterns that AI has found, it can accurately predict the actions of any human being on Earth, even if you go fully off-grid and none of your personal data has been contributed. Now imagine that the DAOs, the large companies that build on the blockchain that will inevitably become very powerful, are the main apps on your home screen. So one of them could be a marketing company DAO. A company could come along to this marketing company DAO, perhaps a pharmaceutical company selling drugs, and they could say to the marketing DAO, I want you to use all the data you have on the blockchain to start advertising my drugs to not just everybody who might need them now, but everybody who is likely to need them in the future. I would like you to plant our brand into their brain 5 or 10 years in advance. Hey, why not maybe push them into becoming addicted to other products that will cause them to need our drug in the future? And then say you might have another app on this Ethereum iPhone called the Military Industrial Complex. So fuck knows who will have access to those powers at that point, but the Military Industrial Complex could be one huge DAO. Based on the data, it could draw out an entire roadmap for invading a country based on its weakest entry points and weakest individuals. It could disseminate extremely intelligent failed propaganda to citizens. The war could be over in minutes. The algorithm would immediately decide who lives and who dies, only responding to votes cast by anonymous and wealthy token holders. And just in case you were thinking this sounds far-fetched, Peter Thiel's company, Palantir, have already had their algorithms used to decide which ICE detainees to arrest. It has been used to fuel the biggest deportation raid in US history, the infamous Brock's 120 raid and the 107-11 raids. He already oversees the algorithms that decide the fates of immigrant families' lives. During that huge US raid, 443 people were arrested, and almost none of them could be prosecuted. Yet there was no human to blame for the poor profiling. Where code is king, you can only blame the algorithm. Oh, and he plans to live until he's 120 years old by taking HGH and blood transfusions from the young.
$1 trillion. And now the mark. Oh! Oh! It went to zero! Yo!
But will revolution happen? That's a tough one. I do believe this is a bubble and that all of the tech is clearly overvalued for reasons I've laid out, but it doesn't mean that it will pop in spectacular fashion, depending on how long the VCs and the vaporware developers can drag it out. If it does deflate or pop, however, the VC investors will not allow it to leave their billionaire clients in the red. Without access to sophisticated algorithms, retail investors will be left in the dirt. That's just an inevitability. And the worrying concentration of those with far-right conspiratorial tendencies who have bought into these schemes may have the rug spectacularly pulled out from under them, and they're going to get angry. Will they turn to socialism to try and fix these problems? I don't think so. The crypto evangelist population skews heavily towards a sort of new age, libertarian, anti-government, right-wingism, and when they see their financial dreams evaporate, they will likely set their sights for revenge on the things that they already despise. The broad effect will lead to a large number of newly angry, bitter, disillusioned, hopeless people who are too steeped in the culture wars to turn towards working class solidarity, and instead turn towards hate. The delusion that salvation from capitalism can be found in new, more clever capitalism is incredibly seductive and always wrong. We may be forced to integrate this technology into society in the long run, and people like Andrew Yang even believe that it could be a force for eradicating poverty. And to do this, he wants to set up a DAO to lobby the government, one that gives more voting power to the rich. But VCs have been wrong in the past. They said that we'd have air taxis by now to take us to the airport. What we actually got was more traffic, but in a tunnel underground.
Oh my, there's a traffic jam.
Here's an idea. How about trains? AI, gene editing, robotics, blockchain, and 3D printing are all predicted as being the future. And they could be right, or they could be very wrong. But if they're right, it needs to be carefully regulated and seen over by the correct people. Otherwise, we will suffer from unfettered capitalism and rampant inequality in ways that we've never seen before. I have nothing against an automated revolution because this could lead to humans having to work less. And this would mean more time for art, and none of it would be of fucking apes. But in the hands of the people that it's in now, it could lead to an elitist owner class and jobless masses. Currently, 47% of US jobs are threatened by automation, and this could go up to 80%. And with an economy based on digital ownership and smart contracts, the elite could collect royalties on every transaction. The idea of renting digital assets from an owner class is already being thrown around. If left to its own devices, I think that this could lead to some sort of tech neo-feudalism. Or, it's probably nothing. Web3 wants to take politics, as we know, out of many things, but not to be neutral, but to take democratic rights and rules for participation away. When only the code decides, and there is no place for debate and political struggle, how do the disenfranchised get heard? How do the powerless organize and revolt? Politics is about struggles, about people having different interests and fighting for them, and often against their political opponents. Web3 doesn't want to stay out of it. It wants it to stop. Whether it happens or not, the conclusion that I've come to is this. Satoshi Nakamoto created blockchain technology after the financial crash in 2008 and successfully marketed it as giving power back to the people. And people still believe that to this day. But the people behind blockchain technology didn't want to help the protesters of Occupy Wall Street. They wanted to be the people on the balcony with the champagne. But if the bubble pops, OpenSea will be pretty much worthless, so I might buy it and change the code to redirect everyone's NFT JPEG links to Goatsea. Full circle,